Hello, listeners. Welcome to a special podcast powered by ENS. My name is David Asiedu. I'm a disputes partner in the Ghana office of ENS. It's a series of 3 podcasts, really, where we discuss, shall we say, the splendid 7 of business and investment topics in East Africa, particularly in relation to Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. In this session, we'll do a whistle-stop tour of the economic landscape, industry-specific trends, the foreign investment climate, legal considerations for business, technology and innovation, sustainability and ESG, and the outlook for the future. Today, we will focus on Kenya, and our guest is Nigel Shaw. Nigel specializes in real estate, energy, private client work, among others. In addition, Nigel heads the Kenyan office of ENS. Nigel, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you, David.
So, Nigel, Kenya is about to, I guess, take its pride of place in the athletics world at the Olympics as they come around. How does it feel as a Kenyan?
It's always a very exciting time for us Kenyans. Typically, we'll do very well in the field events. Normally from, as you know, from the middle distances upwards. So hopefully there'll be lots of medals coming our way. Let's see.
We'll see. As a Ghanaian, I can't have such hopes, even in my dreams. So, shall we dive into it and start with the economic landscape? So, Nigel, what is the current economic landscape in Kenya and how is it affecting local and foreign businesses?
So it's pretty good at the moment. The general sort of feeling around Kenya is that it's got a very stable political system sitting behind it. It's got also a good judiciary that gives investors a lot of comfort so that they know if they run into trouble with any of their investments, there is some legal backing to be had for them. Obviously, at the moment, we're struggling a little bit. There's various movements which are objecting to the current government and trying to get the current government to step down and so on and so forth. So we're going through a little bit of a turbulent moment, but I don't know that it's going to be too bad. It's fairly fluid, the process at the moment. We don't know what's really happening from day to day. And we do take it from day to day. And I'm pleased to see that the government has reacted to these protests, and that they have taken the protesters seriously. And one of the major moves that they've taken is to withdraw the finance bill, which was very aggressive and gonna impact on Kenyans significantly. So that was one of the main things that has happened, and I think that has helped the situation in the country generally.
So, with that background in mind and staying on the economic landscape, Nigel, what are the most significant economic trends you have observed in Kenya, say, over the past year?
So typically for Kenya, it's always been strong in the agricultural sector. That continues to be the case. It's one of the biggest exporters for floriculture. It exports a lot of vegetables as well. And typically going some years back, it's always been tea and coffee, which have been big exports for Kenya. More recently, though, it's interesting to see that there's been significant investment into the country in fintech. And I'm sure you've all heard of M-Pesa, which I hope has reached Ghana as well, David.
The name has it M-Pesa, as I understand, is not yet in Ghana as an operating thing. But yes, we know about the amazing things it's doing in Kenya and some other parts of East Africa.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And in that sense, Kenya's a world leader when it comes to fintech, and M-Pesa is significant, and it's so effective and used throughout the country now that cash, people tend not to deal in cash or checks or even bank transfers nearly as much as they used to. It's all done on your mobile phone these days. So we're seeing a lot of investment into fintech. We're also seeing quite a lot of investment into AI, then a significant number of new companies setting up in the AI space. So that's another area which in itself has spin-offs, because you need significant data centers to run these AI platforms, and we're seeing some investment coming in data centers around the country generally. What else? I should also mention that tourism in this country is a big foreign exchange earner for Kenya, and again, investment into the tourism sector is significant. Again, we're seeing the tourism sector expanding, more lodges, more hotels, more camps coming up in the various national reserves. So it's a big tourist destination, and I would say that that's another significant area that we're seeing investment coming in.
That's great. Fascinating, even. So I was going to ask you further down the line about technology and innovation. I wonder if we'll do that, because I see a lot of what's big and great in Kenya, as you mentioned, is fintech, AI. But we'll see when we get there. Are there any industries that are experiencing significant growth? And what might be driving the growth? I guess we should focus on anything outside agriculture and fintech, which you have already talked about.
I mean, typically Kenya's never been recognized as an industrial nation as such. It's not what I would call a manufacturing powerhouse in any way, shape, or form. There obviously are in the country a number of steel mills, but we find that the steel is imported, so it's not manufactured here in the first place. We also see cars being assembled in Kenya, but again, they're not manufactured here, so to speak. They're not built here. They're kits that come in and are put together. So it's not a big manufacturing country. There's been talk about trying to bolster the manufacturing side of things in this country, but it still sits, as I mentioned earlier, very firmly in the agriculture. That's where it mainly sits. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's huge manufacturing in this country.
Okay, Nigel. We've just talked about some of the hot areas of the Kenyan economy as a thing in itself. How about we link it to the foreign investment climate? What's the current state of foreign investment in Kenya?
It's pretty good. This is basically bolstered by the fact that it's becoming easier for foreigners to get registered in Kenya. For example, to establish a startup company. That used to take quite some months before foreigners even got a registered entity here. Nowadays, it's all on a digital platform. The whole process is much quicker, and it can take you about a week to get your company up and running, which is fantastic. There are other countries in East Africa, such as Rwanda, which I know are even faster and easier to get established. But it's pretty impressive that Kenya can do that. Things like opening bank accounts for foreign investors, that's pretty straightforward. Getting themselves registered with the authorities. Again, that's all done online. So, for example, if they have to get registered with the tax authority, that's done online. A fairly quick process. It's much easier than it used to be. Getting business licenses, again, much easier, and so on. And generally speaking, David, you don't need to have any local participation in your company. So what I mean by that is there's no requirement necessarily, and this doesn't apply across the board. There are some sectors in which you do need local participation, but generally speaking, for whatever business you're in, you don't require any local participation. If your company doesn't want that, you can bring your own company in here, set it up. As a limited liability company, a subsidiary of an overseas company, for example, and you can get up and running. So the whole investment climate has been made a lot easier over the years. Kenya is attractive to investors, as I mentioned earlier, partly because we have a relatively stable political climate. We have a relatively good judiciary to back up disputes and so on and so forth. So generally speaking, we're seeing fairly good investment into the country. I have to say that the current president is doing an excellent job in marketing the country overseas, and so we're starting to see much more investment from the United States of America, Europe, UK is always a big investor into this country. A little less investment from India and China, although India is very strong in textiles and fintech coming into this country. So there's lots of opportunities, certainly, and we're seeing it.
So, Nigel, before I move on to the next question, the thing you said about there being largely no need or no requirement for local participation is interesting, because local content and local participation appears to be all the rage in so many other parts of Africa. So I couldn't resist the urge to ask, is there some kind of quote unquote indirect punishment for going it alone as a foreign investor in Kenya? Is there, for example, higher minimum capital requirements for starting a company without any local participation as a general rule?
Yeah, actually, no, there isn't as such. And I think that's partly why it's relatively attractive in this country for foreign investors. I mean, going back some years back, David, in the mining sector, they tried to introduce local participation into that, and it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is because the foreign investors thought the local participation element was too high, and it was too significant for them to make any sort of return on their investment in Kenya. And I think that was a lesson that this country learned at the time, to be reasonable regarding local participation. And that has meant that, as I said, we're still getting pretty good investment coming in, and as I say, we're seeing it, which is good.
Hey, Nigel, shall we segue into legal considerations? We've kind of talked about why Kenya would be attractive in a business sense, but what are some of the key legal issues you think that businesses operating in Kenya or looking to operate in Kenya should consider at this time?
So from a legal perspective, essentially Kenya operates on the common law system, which of course you're familiar with in Ghana, and this used to be, as you know, a British colony, and there's still a hangover of the legal system, which still is in place. We still have the same sort of system that was imposed by the British all those years back. So there's still the magistrates' court, there's still the High Court, there's still the Court of Appeal, and we now have a Supreme Court. And from a legal point of view, that gives investors comfort because they recognize things like the limited liability company. They know that creature. They know the legal entity that they're dealing with. They know about shareholders. They know about that won't be foreign to them in any way, shape, or form. So that side of things, for certainly most of the Europeans, they're familiar with all that kind of thing. So I don't see that being very different from their home operations, and that gives them comfort from a legal point of view.
Okay, Nigel, shall we just make a very short stop on tech and innovation? I know you spoke about that quite in detail when we're talking about the industry-specific trends, but how is technology currently shaping the business landscape? I remember you talking about the digitalization of the company registration regime, and you also talked about how M-Pesa is changing payments in Kenya and all, but how generally is the use of tech and innovation shaping the business landscape?
Yeah, no, David, thanks for that question. To answer it in one word, I guess it's huge. It's significant. By culture, Kenyans are entrepreneurs. They're looking for new stuff. It's a very well educated population in Kenya. They're interested in tech. They're interested in seeing what can be done on various apps and so on. And these are being created all the time by these new startups. So we're seeing a lot of it. We're seeing it throughout all sectors. I wouldn't say, it's just confined to the financial services sector. It's really across the board. Wherever tech can help out. There's significant moves in the agricultural sector to bring on board more tech, to bring on cameras, to fly the cameras over the crop, whatever that is, be that wheat or barley or avocado pears, sugar cane, you name it. They're starting to bring in cameras to look at the crops for the farmers, and it's interesting to see how they work, in the sense that the cameras can probably see more detail than the human eye can, and whilst the tech can say, look, listen, this particular tree or bush or fruit looks different from the next one, they can then pass that information on to the farmer. Obviously, tech doesn't know what to do about it. Excuse me, but then they show it to the farmer, and the farmer has a look at it and decides what needs to be done.
Fascinating stuff. We can't obviously talk about Kenya at this time without talking about sustainability and ESG. So Nigel, my next question is, how are businesses in Kenya approaching the subject of sustainability and ESG?
It's obviously a global issue, and something that companies are looking at more and more here. It's happening. I wouldn't say it's happening with enormous speed. Having said that, when you've got international companies that have to be compliant and they've got their ESG rules and regulations, then by nature, Kenya's got to follow suit and make sure that it's in line. Um, Interestingly enough, David, I was talking to an estate agent the other day, and when these companies, these overseas international companies, are coming to Kenya, one of the things they're asking for is, we need to be in an ESG type building. Well, there are not so many in Nairobi. So quite difficult to find that sort of thing. But you can see that's an example of how it is starting to kick in. And it's definitely going to be a big part of life in the country. And if I can just move into the energy sector just quickly, under that sector, Kenya is one of the leading renewable power producers in the world. We've got something like over 90% of the power produced in this country is from renewable resources, which is significant. So you've got hydro, you've got solar, excuse me, you've got wind and geothermal.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, so
So
it is
yes,
significant what's going down.
but I guess it will be a different conversation if we were to come back in 5 years or I don't know 8 years to talk about this same ESG thing.
Oh, for sure. I think it would have caught on a lot more. I don't think companies will have an option around it. There will be, audits done on these various companies, and they have to be compliant, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I can see that changing.
Hey, so that about brings us to the end of this ultra interesting podcast. Nigel, thank you so much for spending your valuable time, I know, with us for this very interesting conversation.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on your podcasts.
Thank you. And listeners, that was the Whistle Stop tour we promised you. We hope that it has been as exciting and informative for you as it has been for us. See you on another episode of the podcast soon. Till then, it's bye-bye.